There is one mistake that can destroy your power faster than failure, rejection, or even losing someone. And most people make it without realizing it. They react, they explain. They reveal how badly they need to be understood. The moment someone discovers exactly what can emotionally control you, they have discovered your weakness. Power rarely disappears in one dramatic moment. It leaks away through small reactions. You become defensive when someone criticizes you. You explain yourself when nobody asked for an explanation. You chase someone who is clearly pulling away. You reveal your insecurities to people who have not earned your trust. You speak too much because silence makes you uncomfortable. And sometimes, without realizing it, you give people a map of your emotional weaknesses. They learn what makes you angry, what makes you afraid, what makes you desperate, what makes you seek approval. And once someone understands those things, they do not need physical power over you. They only need to press the right button. This is why psychological strength begins with something most people completely misunderstand. Power is not about controlling other people. It begins with controlling what other people can control inside you. And that starts with the first rule. Never reveal how desperately you need approval. There is a subtle moment when confidence begins to disappear. It happens when your decisions stop being guided by what you believe and start being guided by how other people might react. You say what will be accepted instead of what is true. You hide opinions that might create disagreement. You soften your boundaries because you are afraid someone will become disappointed. You begin checking people's reactions before deciding how you should feel about yourself. This is where approval becomes a hidden form of control. The desire to be respected is natural. The desire to belong is human. But when approval becomes necessary for your emotional stability, you have given other people a lever they can pull whenever they want. They do not have to threaten you. They do not have to insult you. They only have to withdraw approval. Suddenly, you start chasing. You explain more than necessary. You apologize when you have done nothing wrong. You change your position simply because someone becomes uncomfortable. You become available when you should be resting. You tolerate behavior that violates your standards because losing the relationship feels more frightening than losing your dignity. The dangerous part is that you may not recognize this as weakness. You may call it kindness. You may call it maturity. You may say, I just don't like conflict. But sometimes avoiding conflict is simply avoiding the possibility of rejection. There is a difference between being considerate and being controlled by consideration. A considerate person thinks about how his actions affect others. A person dependent on approval thinks about how others' reactions determine his own worth. The first is social intelligence. The second is vulnerability to manipulation. You cannot control what everyone thinks about you, and trying to do so is exhausting because people do not judge from the same standards. One person will admire your ambition. Another will call it arrogance. One will appreciate your boundaries. Another will accuse you of becoming selfish. One will respect your silence. Another will assume you are insecure. If you try to satisfy every interpretation, you will eventually have no identity of your own. This is why you must become comfortable with disappointing people. Not because you enjoy disappointing them, because it is unavoidable. There will be moments when your interests conflict with someone else's expectations. There will be moments when saying yes would betray something important to you. There will be moments when doing the right thing for your life creates discomfort for someone else. You need to survive those moments without immediately abandoning your position. This is where internal authority begins. You stop asking, will they like this? You begin asking, is this right for me? You stop asking, will they approve? You begin asking, Does this align with my values? You stop asking, what will they think? You begin asking, what happens if I betray myself just to avoid their reaction? That last question is especially important because approval often feels expensive only when you calculate the cost of losing it, but you should also calculate the cost of obtaining it. How much of your personality have you edited? How many opportunities have you refused? How many boundaries have you abandoned? How many times have you remained silent? How many times have you accepted less than you wanted because you were afraid of appearing difficult? There is a price for being liked by everyone. You become less recognizable to yourself. The strongest people are not necessarily those who receive the most approval. Often, they are those who can tolerate disapproval without falling apart. They can hear criticism and evaluate it. They can hear an insult and remain calm. They can hear rejection and continue moving. They can lose someone's approval without losing their identity. That is a form of freedom. And once you have that freedom, people have less leverage over you. This does not mean becoming arrogant or indifferent. You should still listen. You should still admit mistakes. You should still consider criticism. The difference is that you do not automatically obey it. You take information without surrendering authority. Someone says you are wrong. You ask whether they have evidence. Someone says you have changed. You ask whether the change reflects growth. Someone says you are selfish because you established a boundary. You ask whether the boundary protects something important. You learn to separate useful criticism from emotional pressure. That distinction is essential because people sometimes criticize not because you are wrong, but because your behavior has become less convenient for them. They were comfortable when you always said yes. They liked you when you were always available. They appreciated you when you never challenged them. And when you change, they may accuse you of becoming cold. Do not immediately return to your old behavior simply to restore their comfort. Growth often changes relationships. Some people will move closer because they respect the stronger version of you. Others will move away because they preferred the version that had fewer boundaries. You cannot prevent both outcomes, and you should not try. Your objective is not to maintain every relationship at any cost. Your objective is to build relationships that can survive honesty. There is also a practical way to reduce your dependence on approval. Become competent, build skills, keep promises to yourself, develop financial independence, strengthen your body, improve your communication, create meaningful work, build a life that you respect. When you trust yourself, external approval becomes less necessary. You do not need everyone to tell you that you are capable because you have evidence. You do not need everyone to tell you that you are disciplined because you know what you do when nobody is watching. You do not need everyone to tell you that you have value because your life reflects the standards you have chosen. Self-respect is built through evidence. Every time you act according to your principles despite discomfort, you teach yourself that your judgment matters. Every time you abandon yourself for approval, you teach yourself the opposite. This is why the battle is not really against other people. It is against the part of you that believes rejection is unbearable. Rejection is painful, but it is survivable. Disapproval is uncomfortable, but it is survivable. Being misunderstood can hurt, but it is survivable. What becomes dangerous is believing that you must prevent these experiences at any cost, because then you become easy to direct. Someone can control you by threatening to leave. Someone can control you by becoming angry. Someone can control you by withholding affection. Someone can control you by telling you what other people think. The more desperately you need approval, the more powerful these tactics become. The solution is not to become heartless. It is to become internally anchored. Care about people, but do not surrender yourself to them. Listen, but think independently. Love, but maintain boundaries. Accept criticism, but keep your judgment. And when approval disappears, remain standing. That is when your behavior begins to change. You stop performing, you stop proving, you stop chasing, you stop negotiating with every person's opinion. You become quieter because you no longer need to announce your worth. You become more deliberate because you are not reacting to every social signal. And eventually, people notice that your decisions are no longer easily influenced by their approval or disapproval. That is where real psychological power begins. Stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided. There is a moment when explanation stops being communication and becomes self-defense. You explain why you said no. Then you explain why you changed your mind. Then you explain why you were unavailable. Then you explain your intentions. Then you explain your character. And after all of that, the other person still believes what they wanted to believe. At some point, you must recognize that more words will not create understanding where there is no willingness to understand. Not everyone who questions you is seeking information. Some people are seeking control. They ask questions not because they want to understand your decision, but because they want you to reconsider it. They keep pushing until your explanation contains a weakness they can negotiate with. This is why excessive explanation can quietly weaken your position. The more you defend every decision, the more you communicate that your decisions require external approval. You do not need to justify every boundary. You do not need to submit your life for public review. Sometimes that doesn't work for me is enough. Sometimes I've decided differently is enough. Sometimes silence is enough. The ability to stop explaining is not arrogance. It is discernment. Of course, there are situations where explanation matters. In close relationships, communication can prevent unnecessary misunderstandings. At work, clarity can protect cooperation. When you genuinely make a mistake, accountability matters. But explanation should have a purpose. If your explanation creates understanding, continue. If it creates endless debate, reconsider. You can often recognize the difference by what happens after you clarify. A reasonable person may disagree, but still respect your position. A manipulative person may ignore the explanation and search for another angle. They question your motives, then your character, then your intentions, then your memory, then your right to make the decision at all. The conversation becomes endless because the objective was never understanding. It was compliance. Once you recognize that pattern, you stop feeding it. You do not become aggressive. You become brief. You do not need to win the argument. You need to protect your decision. This is especially important when dealing with people who are accustomed to having access to your emotional energy. They know exactly what to say to make you defend yourself. They know which accusation will make you explain. They know which disappointment will make you apologize. If you understand this, you can begin noticing the trigger before you react. Someone says, "Why are you acting differently?" You do not immediately write a paragraph. Someone says, "After everything I've done for you," you do not automatically surrender. Someone says, "You're becoming selfish." You consider whether the accusation is true instead of reacting to the accusation itself. This is emotional independence. You allow other people to have their interpretation without making their interpretation your responsibility. People are entitled to misunderstand you. You are not obligated to correct every misunderstanding. Sometimes your actions will clarify your intentions over time. If they do not, that may be acceptable, because there is a dangerous habit of trying to control your reputation with everyone. You cannot. People see what they want to see. They interpret events through their own experiences. They protect their own ego. They create stories that make them feel justified. You could spend your entire life correcting those stories and still fail, so become selective. Explain yourself when the relationship matters and the person is genuinely open. Explain yourself when clarification prevents unnecessary damage. Explain yourself when you made an actual mistake. But when someone has already decided that you are wrong and is simply waiting for you to provide more material, stop. There is power in letting someone remain unconvinced. You do not need to drag them toward your perspective. Let them have their opinion. You have your life. This becomes especially powerful when you combine it with consistency. If your actions repeatedly match your principles, eventually explanations become less necessary. People learn what to expect from you. They learn that when you say no, you mean no. When you make a commitment, you honor it. When you walk away, you do not create a dramatic scene. When you disagree, you do not need to attack. When you make a mistake, you correct it. Consistency creates credibility, and credibility reduces the need for constant explanation. The goal is not to become mysterious for the sake of appearing powerful. The goal is to stop wasting energy on conversations that produce no value. Your attention is limited, your time is limited, your emotional energy is limited. Spend those resources carefully. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every misunderstanding deserves a correction. Not every opinion deserves a response. Sometimes the strongest response is to continue living according to your standards while someone else remains committed to their interpretation. Because once you stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided, you discover something important. You were never required to win their approval in the first place. Control your reactions before others learn to control you. Your reaction is often more valuable to another person than your opinion. If they discover that one insult can make you angry, one criticism can make you defensive, or one withdrawal of attention can make you desperate, they have discovered a lever. Emotional control begins with creating distance between what happens and what you do next. Pause. Observe. Ask whether the situation deserves your energy. You do not need to suppress emotion. You need to prevent temporary emotion from making permanent decisions. The calmer you remain under pressure, the fewer buttons other people have to push. Do not give everyone access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves to know your fears, insecurities, ambitions, weaknesses, or private struggles. Trust should be earned through consistent behavior, not granted because someone appears friendly. Share gradually and observe what people do with what you reveal. A trustworthy person protects your vulnerability. An opportunistic person collects it. This does not mean becoming cold or suspicious of everyone. It means developing discernment. Your inner world is valuable territory. Protect it carefully, because when someone knows exactly what you fear, what you desire, and what makes you emotionally unstable, they may know exactly where to apply pressure. Stop chasing what is trying to escape you. When someone pulls away, your first instinct may be to pursue harder. You send another message, offer another explanation, or increase your effort hoping to restore what is disappearing. But chasing often destroys the clarity you need. If someone wants distance, give it. If an opportunity closes, stop begging at the door. Your attention should not become a desperate attempt to hold what no longer wants to remain. Let people and situations reveal their direction. Sometimes the strongest move is not to chase harder, but to release your grip and observe what happens. Make your words rare and your actions consistent. Powerful communication is not about speaking constantly. The more you explain, promise, threaten, or announce, the easier it becomes for your words to lose weight. Speak when something matters, and make your behavior support what you said. If you establish a boundary, enforce it. If you make a commitment, keep it. If you say you will change, demonstrate the change through repetition. People eventually stop judging your claims and start judging your patterns. Your reputation becomes stronger when your actions consistently confirm your words, making unnecessary explanations almost irrelevant over time. Never let anger make your decisions. Anger can make you feel powerful while quietly making you predictable. Someone provokes you, and suddenly you are responding on their schedule, using their emotional frame and giving them exactly the reaction they wanted. Pause before acting. Ask what outcome you actually want. If your response will damage your reputation, relationships, or future simply to satisfy a temporary emotion, it is probably too expensive. Controlled anger can reveal that a boundary has been crossed, but discipline decides what happens next. The strongest response is often the one you choose after the emotion has lost its grip. Learn to walk away without needing the last word. Not every conflict deserves a victory. Sometimes your greatest advantage is refusing to continue a conversation designed only to provoke you. You do not need to convince someone who has no interest in understanding. You do not need to answer every insult, correct every accusation, or prove that you were right. Walking away protects your time and prevents another person from controlling your attention. Leaving is not weakness when you are leaving deliberately. It means you understand that your peace, reputation, and future are worth more than winning an argument that produces nothing valuable. Protect your attention like it is your greatest asset. Your attention is one of the few resources you can never recover once it is spent. Every distraction, pointless argument, unnecessary explanation, and obsessive thought takes something from you. People who constantly interrupt your focus can influence your life without ever making a direct demand. Protect your attention deliberately. Decide what deserves your mental energy and what does not. You do not need to respond immediately to every message, opinion, provocation, or request. The more carefully you control your attention, the more difficult it becomes for outside noise to dictate your priorities and decisions. Become so secure that manipulation has nothing to grab. Manipulation becomes difficult when you stop depending on external validation to feel secure. If you are not terrified of rejection, someone cannot easily control you by threatening to leave. If you do not need constant praise, flattery loses its power. If you can admit mistakes, shame becomes less useful against you. Build security through competence, self-knowledge, discipline, and honest relationships. Know your values before someone pressures you to abandon them. The goal is not to become untouchable or emotionless. It is to become grounded enough that other people's approval, anger, or disappointment cannot easily determine who you are or what you choose. When you understand power at a deeper level, you realize that it is rarely about being the loudest person in the room. It is about becoming difficult to manipulate. You stop depending on approval. You stop explaining yourself to people who have already made their decision. You learn to pause before reacting. You become selective about who receives access to your inner world. You stop chasing people and situations that are moving away from you. You make your words more deliberate and your actions more consistent. You stop allowing anger to make decisions that your calmer mind will later regret. You learn to walk away without needing the final word. And you protect your attention because you finally understand that whatever controls your attention eventually influences your life. But beneath all of these principles is something even more important. Self-security. When you know who you are, manipulation becomes harder. When rejection no longer terrifies you, threats of abandonment lose their power. When you can admit your mistakes, shame becomes less effective. When you no longer need everyone to approve of you, approval stops being a weapon. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming governed from within. You can still care, you can still love, you can still listen, you can still be vulnerable, but you choose when, where, and with whom. Your life no longer becomes a reaction to whatever another person says or does. That is where your power returns, not because you learned how to dominate people, but because you stopped handing them the controls. And once you reach that level of internal security, people may still disagree with you, criticize you, reject you, or misunderstand you, but they can no longer easily determine who you become. If this changed the way you think about personal power, subscribe to the channel and comment. I control my reaction. Make it your rule, because the goal was never to become impossible to hurt. It was to become grounded enough that other people's approval, anger, or disappointment cannot easily determine who you are or what you choose.